Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the IMMP, the Inter-Millennium Media Project podcast. My name is Matthew Porter.
And I'm Ian Porter.
I'm his dad, he's my son, and we've returned to the 1980s.
Ah, such a time for cinema.
Come back to a movie, not that magical year of 1984, but another pretty good year, which is 1987.
Yeah. 87 had some interesting things, didn't it?
It did. And this just makes the cutoff for what's in bounds for our podcast. That's the year I graduated college. So that's kind of the cutoff of the end of my youth, I guess.
There's this void in between you graduating college and me coming into existence, which we cannot touch.
Well, this is why we have those out of bounds shows on the Patreon feed.
Exactly. But of course, it would be quite the adventure to go find those, or not. It's easy to find us on Patreon at Inter-Millennium Media Project. But if you're looking for adventures,
yes,
this is a movie you showed to me early.
I did show this to you a while ago, didn't I?
Yes, this is one where it was like I almost want to say like early high school, middle school age-ish.
That sounds about right. That's probably a good age to see this movie.
Yeah, this one was right on time. I've followed in your footsteps and watched things I shouldn't at that same sort of time, but this was around that time, and it was the right kind of movie.
And the movie we're talking about is Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, goodness.
This was written by David Simkins and directed by Chris Columbus.
Oh, goodness. This is Chris Columbus.
It is, who went on to direct such things as Home Alone and a few of the Harry Potter movies. And also Young Sherlock Holmes, which we have covered here on the podcast.
Yes, he did Young Sherlock Holmes. He actually did Young Sherlock Holmes like just before this, I believe, right?
I believe so, yes.
Was he director on that, or?
I believe so. That might have been his debut as a feature film director.
No. This was his debut.
Oh.
He was a writer on Young Sherlock Holmes.
He didn't direct that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was his directorial debut.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. But it feels like the right kind of thing.
It does.
This has his style.
They all swirl together. And speaking of style, this being set in and around this sort of mythicized version of Chicago, I keep thinking somewhere in the back of my mind that it's a John Hughes film, but it's not. John Hughes had nothing to do with this. Yeah.
This is Hughesian in a way that's unexpectedly poignant. But no, this is a little bit of that Chris Columbus moment to moment chaos kind of feeling, that scene to scene, sequencing in that certain way where it's like, okay, we moved from a situation into another situation. How can this one go awry? And then it moves to the next one that will go awry in a way that does reach a satisfying conclusion, but it's all 90-degree turns.
And every time I watch this movie, I have a different reaction to it. I liked it so much when I first saw it, and I've never not enjoyed it viewing it again. But it always strikes me in different ways, maybe because it is so much a thing of its time and I'm responding differently depending on who I am and when it is that I'm watching it again.
Yes. Similarly, every time I've seen this, and I've watched this a few times since, a different character feels like the focus character.
Oh, that's interesting. I can see where that would be, though.
Because this movie, like, in taking our characters through this, it's a crew of four. Mm-hmm. It's Chris Parker, played by Elizabeth Shue. It's Brad Anderson and his little sister Sarah, played by Keith Coogan and Maya Bruton. And it's Daryl Coopersmith played by Anthony Rapp, which I'm bewildered because I've seen Rapp in so many things since.
Yes, yes.
And just seeing him play this character in early days is so wild.
Yeah, he has such a distinctive style and such a, even at that age, he had this comic timing and this comic sense that it was a potentially very, very unlikable character who nevertheless had you rooting for him somehow.
Yeah, he plays the likable awful guy.
Yes.
But not the bad guy. There are bad guys, and interestingly enough, there is one guy who is kind of the worst guy, and that's played by Bradley Whitford.
Yes, we also get a young Bradley Whitford.
Yes.
Playing a high school senior a few years later than he should be playing a high school senior, I think.
Yeah.
But still. And that's...
We've got John Chandler as a mob boss. This
Yes.
is just wildly full of heavy hitters, both former or like towards the end of their career and early in their career.
And that's one of the things that makes the movie work so well is that casting. This movie would have everything about this movie is unbelievable, but you keep following it. You're invested because the cast is so good and because they are so well suited to the roles. And that's all of our leads, as you described, but also some of these smaller supporting roles. They just fit together. They make this bizarre world seem more real.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, in some countries, this film is called A Night on the Town.
That gives such a different feeling, though.
Doesn't it? But
yes.
It's maybe it's in countries where babysitting per se isn't the thing that it is in the U.S. But it is this story of a somewhat fantastical journey through Chicagoland.
A magical land of Chicago.
Yes. A nocturnal journey. But it all starts because Elizabeth Shue's character, her boyfriend, with whom she is infatuated, cancels their big fancy date. We see her getting ready for this big fancy date with a terrific lip sync sequence. And then Bradley Whitford shows up at the door looking all sad, and his little sister's sick, so he has to cancel their date.
If you've never seen this movie, you might have seen a parody of the opening of this movie, because that opening with the lip sync is something I've seen referenced other places.
And in general, the 80s teen movie lip sync sequence is such a repeated trope.
Mm-hmm.
But it's done, I think it's used well, and it's done well here. But she's just depressed. She has nowhere to be that night. When a neighbor asks if she can babysit for them because their usual sitter canceled, she says she's too old for babysitting, but why not? She can be depressed there as easily as she can be depressed at home. So
yeah.
So she goes ahead and decides to go and babysit. And that's when we start to see the kids that she has to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Brad is the older brother in the Anderson siblings, and he is a younger kid who is absolutely infatuated with Chris, a high school senior.
Yes, so he's head over heels for her, but yeah, they're not quite at the same age, let alone the same league.
Exactly. Meanwhile, his little sister Sarah is obsessed with this obscure Marvel character, or not obscure, but Marvel Comics character called Thor.
Yes, not an A-list character back in 1987.
No.
But a very distinctive character.
Mm-hmm.
So the Thor is just the coolest character in the world. She roller skates around with a plastic Thor helmet on her head. Spends the entire movie with this plastic Thor helmet.
And a little tiny plastic hammer.
Yes. And
she has a little Mjolnir.
Spends all of her time drawing pictures of Thor. This is just the coolest thing in the world.
I do appreciate just to snap forward in time to the present day. I do appreciate that Disney Plus can now suggest the Thor movies after
Yes.
you watch this.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as odd for a kid to think Thor is a cool character, unless they didn't like Love and Thunder, that it did in 1987.
Ah,
But
yeah.
and of course, there's the usual sibling tension between Sarah and Brad. But then, as you mentioned, we've got Anthony Rapp as Daryl, who's the kind of wisecracking, a little bit smarmy, but very bright friend of Brad. It seems like it's going to be a normal run of the mill evening of babysitting
Hmm.
until Chris
Her
gets a
friend,
collect call at the home at which she is babysitting. And this is from her friend Brenda. And we know Brenda's home life is not great. We saw them chatting. But Brenda has run away from home. She's at the bus stop, the bus station in Chicago. And all of this so far is taking place out in the safe suburbs of Chicago. But Brenda has decided it's too dangerous. She's made a horrible decision. She doesn't want to run away from home, but she has no way to get back. Can Chris come and pick her up at the bus station in downtown Chicago?
which is kind of funny because Brenda literally was pushing her to take the babysitting job
Yes.
earlier that day, and now is asking her to ditch the babysitting job to help her. Brenda really is the instigator and problem
She is.
for a large part of this.
And this is one of those plots that simply would not exist
Thank you.
except for the fact that for teenagers in 1987, there were no cell phones and it was an entirely cash economy. So Brenda
Well,
can't take a cab back home because neither she nor Chris has the cash to pay for the cab.
exactly.
None of them have cell phones or anything like that. So much of the plot is driven by needing cash money and not having ready communications.
Another film whose plot has crumbled in the face of digital infrastructure.
Yes. This is why, the part of the country where we live is not a bad place to set adventure or mystery stories, because it is quite plausible that you take one more curve around a mountain road and suddenly you don't have cell service.
Yeah, we're one of the places where this can still happen in that weird way. But, in exchange for babysitting being a possibly less exciting job, you, fine audience, have obtained wonderful things like podcasts. I hope we are in equal trade.
Yeah, we're probably not selling the Rocky Mountains as a good place to live. If one of our big points is, you never know when you're going to be totally out of communication with the civilized world.
That is a point of positive for some people.
I guess so.
But Chris is a good friend, and the kids are all excited to go on an adventure. So they
Yes.
kind of nudge her in the direction of everyone pile into the car. We're going to save Brenda, and then we'll get home, and your parents won't even know we did it.
Yeah, she's really stuck that, she can't just leave Brenda out there to die. She has to look after these kids. So, as you say, they all get into the car. And of course, Daryl comes along because he sees what's happening and knows that, well, I'm sure that Mr. and Mrs. Anderson are going to be very interested in the fact that you've taken their kids, Brad and Sarah, all the way into Chicago when you're supposed to be here babysitting. Like he says, well, I'll tell my mom, and maybe you can babysit for me sometime, and we can, I don't know, drive to New York some weekend.
Exactly. He is absolutely awful, but it follows the hero's journey. We've got a standard everyday life. We've got a call to adventure. We've got a denial of the call, and now they're going on the quest.
And it's as ill-advised as this might be, it should be fairly simple to drive downtown, pick up Brenda, and bring her home.
Exactly.
But of course, it's not quite that simple.
Nope. They get onto the highway, they get onto the interstate, and pop a tire. And this tire is the start of the snowball of chaos that they will go through.
There is a little bit of the problem of the story being driven not by until and therefore, but being driven by the and then, just stacking event on top of event without that causal connection.
It takes a little bit for there to be because.
Right. And usually that's more of a problem in movies. I think the fact that this keeps the pace going. And the whole point of this movie, the tone of it is what could possibly make this worse? Not what is this going to lead to? So it's not a formula that works all the time, but it seems to work in this movie. Because the tire blows out, they manage to get the car onto the shoulder without any damage or harm to anybody inside, and they don't have a spare. A tow truck driver shows up who seems pretty scary at first, but then turns out to be a very generous and friendly guy.
Handsome John Pruitt.
Yeah, handsome John Pruitt. He's one of the real heroes, though not entirely a heroic character.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's an interesting guy because he's got like the absolute crazy madman laugh, and he's missing a hand.
Yes.
So he's this, guy with a hook, and they've just been telling each other little horror stories in the car, possibly to calm their nerves, which I don't understand why they were doing it, but it means they're all primed to freak out when they see a guy missing a hand.
So he offers to tow them to Dawson's garage. He'll pay for them to get a new tire that'll get them home because, it wouldn't be right to leave your kids out here to fend for yourselves. So it seems like, okay, this was an exciting incident. We shouldn't have done this, but at least this friendly guy is going to help us. Until a radio call comes in from Dawson telling Pruitt that that guy is over at your house with your wife once again.
Yes. And that was from Dawson, right?
Yeah, it was.
Because do you know who was voicing Dawson?
Yes, because we see him later on.
Yeah.
It's Vincent D'Onofrio.
Continuing. We keep on getting big names.
We do. So he's
one of those voices I almost recognized in the thing. I'm like, wait a minute.
And I didn't remember that it was in fact, I knew D'Onofrio was in this as Dawson. I didn't remember that he was the one who made that radio call, but it worked.
It works.
But this, of course, changes the plans because Pruitt, it goes a little bit crazy. He changes course to head home. He pulls a gun out of the glove compartment and rushes into the house, and there's this giant argument and shootout in Pruitt's house.
And outside of Pruitt's house, as the bullets go flying and break the window of their already flat-tired car.
Right. So, and this, I guess we do have some of those, therefore type things, because this is happening and their car is not safe. They run down the block and get into another car. Just, they happen to find a car with the door open. So they're safe until they see the guy in the driver's seat and realize that he's in the process of stealing this car.
So now they're in a car being driven away by a car thief. The car owned by the guy who was at John Pruitt's house, actually. Just to add layers to this.
Yeah, that the world does stay a certain limited size in that way.
I have compared many a show, many a movie on this podcast to like a tabletop role-playing game. this has that feeling going scene from scene. It also sometimes has that feeling in the I only have so many painted minis, so this is the same guy, and everyone will roll with it.
That
Because
makes
people will
sense.
show back up. People have weird connections.
Let's just pull out that character sheet again. And
Yeah. Yep.
so this introduces them to Joe Gipp, played by Calvin Levels, who is a kind-hearted criminal. His job,
Such a trope.
yeah, his job is boosting cars and bringing them to this mob-run chop shop. But at the same time, he's not going to leave these kids out where they can, where they're in this horrible neighborhood. He's going to see what he can do to get them to safety. So he winds up bringing them back to the chop shop because he just can't think of anything else to do.
There's a little bit of an I'm safe there, so you'll be safe there.
Yeah, he's not necessarily thinking this through, but he means well. And of course, the mobsters who run this place are not very happy because now there are all these civilians who've seen their operation and they can't just be allowed to leave.
But he also does immediately respect and like them, because while they're all obviously scared, her first response is, "You're not going to hurt the kids."
Yes.
And he's just realizing, you're this scared, but you're going to take the job seriously and protect them. And then he watches as she just absolutely keeps all the other three in line. And there's this like, okay, I can respect you. You know what you're doing. You're in over your head, but you've got a good head on those shoulders. So.
And that is the consistent theme, the consistent trait of this character, of Chris, is that she'll be frightened, she'll be panicked, but she is always focused on the safety of these kids.
Exactly.
And they are, Daryl's sense of humor notwithstanding, they are good kids. They're a handful, but they're good kids. Mm-hmm. And some of the humor comes from seeing these suburban kids of limited experience try to deal with the people they encounter in Chicago. And there's repeatedly people pointing out, you must be from the suburbs, or them saying, well, we're from the suburbs. And, that's not a surprise to anybody in Chicago. But for example, Daryl is saying, well, you don't have to worry. We promise we are not going to tell anybody about your criminal operation here. In fact, and I'm sorry, this is not Daryl. This is Brad.
This is Brad.
Brad's saying, well, we could write up an agreement. We'll sign it. We could bring it to a notary public.
Yes.
He's getting a little panicky. And when he panics, he comes up with solutions. Not good solutions, but solutions.
And there's such an absolute hi. I know. We'll explain that you're breaking the system by trusting the system to to verify our agreement that we won't say you're breaking it. Wait a minute.
And that leads us to another kind of suspense or action scene, because the kids are put into like an upstairs office until the bosses can figure out what to do with them. And they take the opportunity to escape, but they escape by walking across rafters up in the ceiling, up in the top of the building, with all of the chop shop and the mobsters right down below.
Mm-hmm. But Daryl also steals a magazine.
Yes, he does. That's a recurring MacGuffin, not the MacGuffin. But a recurring MacGuffin is this copy of Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
Which Daryl was talking to Brad about before because he had stolen his father's copy of it. And the centerfold, he insisted was an absolute lookalike for Chris.
Which becomes an awkward,
It does.
An awkward plot point later. But
because Brad had thrown away his dad's copy, he stole the copy from the mobsters when he found it in the office.
And they escape, but turns out the mobsters took notes.
And they
that
took
they
notes
need
in the
in
magazine.
that copy. Which of all the what in the world are these mobsters doing?
So now the mobsters are concerned not just about the fact that there are these kids who could testify, I guess, but they had a written record of their, criminal orders and who their clients were and could bring the whole operation down.
Yeah.
So now it becomes not just how do we get home and how do we save Brenda, but how do we escape these mobsters who are pursuing us?
And the mobsters are coming after them, and I'm trying to remember the rest, because this is where you get like little vignettes almost as they run from place to place. And the main ones I can think of are they wind up uh in a nightclub, in a blues club.
Yeah, they run in through the stage door just to get off the street, so being pursued. And they wind up on stage in a blues club in Chicago.
And this is one of those classic scenes, because ain't nobody get out of here without singing the blues.
Yes. That's what the band leader tells them, so they got to sing the blues. They want to get off that stage.
Which,
And
of all the reasons in an 80s movie to have a musical number.
But it evolves. It's not, I wouldn't say it's believable, but it's kind of organic the way it evolves, because she just starts, she's given a microphone. So she just starts telling everybody what kind of a night they've had. And after go ahead.
Oh, that is one thing we've seen every single time. They are honest and open. They always give their names. They always explain what's going on. And they always say, they introduce themselves with full names to the mobsters. They introduce themselves with full names to handsome John Pruitt, even when he was scaring them.
Yep.
They never cut any of it. There's like, hi, here's who I am, open and honest. And when they're put in front of a mic, that same open honesty turns into the basis for the song.
That's a great point.
It's actually part of a pattern.
Yeah, they meet so many new people, and they are totally honest about who they are and what situation they're in.
Hi, I'm Chris Parker, and I'm Brad Anderson. It's like last names and everything. Mm-hmm. But that's the setup that kind of makes it believable that they would just start telling the entire story, and it turns into Babysitting Blues.
It does, because she just starts telling the story, and after every sentence, the band throws in a blues riff. Another sentence, another blues riff. She pauses, and they have a little fill as they go into a chorus. And next thing you know, in this weirdly believable way within this context, they are doing a whole full musical number with Chris singing lead and the kids doing backup and the band supporting them. It's just, it's absurd, but it's fun because the movie so far had earned it.
One of my favorite parts of Babysitting Blues is that after encountering a mere half of all the things they are going to deal with, the song includes the assumption that Brenda's probably dead.
Yes.
It's like, I was going to get my friend Brenda. We've not gotten to her. We might have lost her. And it's just suddenly in the main thing, it's like the girl's probably dead.
Yeah, and we should be in bed, and the girl's probably dead.
Exactly. It's like, wow.
Because we do occasionally cut back to Brenda's adventures at the bus station.
Yes.
They are, I could do without a lot of those. I guess they need to include those sometime just to maintain the fact that there's still that pre-existing tension. Brenda's in danger, and apart from surviving, Chris and the kids have to rescue Brenda. But it's a lot of it is the humor of portraying homeless people as insane.
Yeah.
A lot of it is Brenda loses her glasses, without which she can barely see, and therefore she mistakes everything else around her and has difficulty navigating, and she doesn't have any cash, so she can't even buy a hot dog, and
there's a little bit of a mini Mr. Magoo going on.
Yeah. I can understand why they need it. I could do with a lot less of Brenda's adventures in bus station land.
she kind of becomes the interstage cutscenes to
Yeah.
maintain the Brenda meter.
That's true. Without those cutaways, the rapid sequence of events that Chris and the kids go through might seem a little bit too much. We need that pause every once in a while. So I guess it works for pacing as well.
Brenda becomes loading time. But Babysitting Blues is amazing, and I do love that having bonded with these kids, the immediate way that they get away from the mobsters is ain't nobody leave here without singing the blues.
Yeah, the mobsters
And
follow them, but the rules are the rules.
the rules are the rules. So you can just imagine that there must be like the mob blues as an entire cutscene or something, or like these mobsters have to sing as well.
I wonder. I mean, the mobsters could have forced their way out some other way, but at least the blues guys delayed them and gave Chris and the kids a chance to escape.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's one of the high points of the movie, I think, is that musical number.
That musical number is excellent.
And it also confirms that, if you hadn't really been on board before then, once you get that musical number, this is a fable. This is a fantastical story. This is not attempting to be any kind of a naturalistic portrayal about kids in trouble in Chicago. It is a weird fantasy adventure that happens to be set in this mythical city of Chicago, full of danger and intrigue.
Chicago is the Fey realm.
Yes.
This strange magical land with its own rules and controlling powers. But they run off. They wind up in a train station and on a train in a gang fight.
Trying to get back to where Brenda is. They're in a train that is the site of an impending rumble between two gangs as it's crossing the territory lines.
Which does result in the scene that the most modern versions you can get modify the line.
Yeah.
But this is where they do have the one main expletive moment.
There are a few things like that.
Don't beep with the babysitter.
Yes. I thought it was just that one, but watching it again, there's an earlier scene when they're deciding to walk across the rafters to escape the chop shop. Daryl thinks this is insane. In the version you would see on Disney Plus or a current copy of it, he says, "You've got to be kidding me." He doesn't say kidding in the original. He uses an expletive.
Oh.
And says it twice in a row. And then I'm pulling out a card here that I wrote things on one of my index cards. He also, early on, when we first are meeting Brad and Sarah, Brad gets Sarah really, really angry by insulting Thor. In the current version, he says Thor's a weirdo. In the original version, that's not the word he used for Thor. Oh. He used a slur involving sexual orientation.
Oh.
I can understand them removing that if they want to continue circulating this movie in 2024. And it's not like, usually I'm very much against changing an original movie, put it in context of its time and watch it as it was made. For a movie like Adventures in Babysitting, if they want to make it accessible and make it enjoyable by changing a word like that to weirdo, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, that's one that it's understandable to change.
And then there's the one that you mentioned where, there's the line in the new version is, one of the gangs is the Lords of Hell.
Mm-hmm.
So a member of the Lords of Hell says, "Don't fool with the Lords of Hell." And in the original, he used language that you would more expect somebody from the Lords of Hell to use. And she responds.
It's the fact that she grabs his knife and then says back, "Don't don't fool with the babysitter is such a wild power move.
It
And there's
is.
kind of this, once again, Chris's defensive and protect the people under her care attitude
Yes.
keep getting respect out of the hardest people in Chicago.
That's when you see this is a lioness, and you do not want to mess with her and her charges, especially.
Bingo.
And the reason she was able to grab the knife that belonged to this guy from the Lords of Hell is that the guy had just flipped it into the foot of Brad. So Brad had a knife in his foot.
Yeah. Brad got stabbed.
He did. And that leads to a hospital sequence in which Brad gets one stitch, which kind of disappoints him, as he puts it. My one chance to be in a gang fight, and all I get is one stitch. And
I love this. Also is one of my favorite characters, the most beleaguered doctor.
yes, a
this
ER doctor in an
doctor-
emergency in a university hospital in Chicago. He sees
just-
things at that hour of night.
This is the best, like, haunted man just trying to do his job I've ever seen on screen. He's just
Yeah.
like, oh no. It's like somehow he's functional, but always perpetually about to faint.
And that also leads to a mistaken identity or mistaken reporting where they briefly think that Brad has died from his toe wound, but it turns out he's
Yeah.
alive, and we get that little bit of catharsis for the characters there.
Lords of Hell with their poisoned knives, I guess. What the heck?
I guess so.
Yeah. But no, he walks out to find everyone mourning his demise, and he's okay.
And this is where we learn that the car that was stolen by Joe Gibb is belonged to the guy who was fooling around with Pruitt's wife, because he's there and sees the kids and wants his car back.
Well, actually, the guy had run out and tried to get the car back, and then was punched in the face by John Pruitt. So we'd seen earlier, but
Oh,
they're
that's
both
right. We
there.
had seen him.
Yeah. Well, they're both there, though. And this is where they reunite with John Pruitt for a moment, who gets to tell them, I fixed your windshield I shot, but you're going to have to pay for the tire. It's at the garage that I was telling you I'd bring it to. You can get your car there.
Right. And they don't have the $50 for the car,
Nope.
for the tire.
And it is a cash economy. You need money on hand.
And this is where Daryl and his poor decision making and his poor instincts actually
Save
lead
them.
them in a useful direction.
Yeah.
Because here they are in the University of Chicago area, and he noticed there's a party going on in this house that they happen to be in front of, so he's going to go into the college party. And Chris and the rest have to follow him.
Mm-hmm. And, this is another instance, though, where going into the college party, we like the opening bits where they're setting up before the trip has so many tiny things that come into importance later.
Yes.
From the
yes.
magazine to the Thor to the fact that Chris is trying to decide if she's going to go to college after graduation.
Right.
And so here she is kind of thrust in her journey into a college environment.
Oh, and one thing we didn't mention is what we learn about her boyfriend, Bradley Whitford.
Well, yeah, we learn about that. Oh, yeah. He's a jerk.
Yes, because that was before the party, right?
No, that's after.
It is after. Okay.
That is after. But we have already heard some chit chat in the car about the fact that her boyfriend beat up and was mean to her, mostly Daryl. But in Daryl trying to tease his friend about his crush, the discussion topic comes up
Yes.
about her boyfriend and the fact that he's a jerk.
And she doesn't want to believe bad things about him, but you sort of get the impression she doesn't think this is totally unlikely. She's just
Yeah,
infatuated enough to ignore some of this evidence.
which is sad.
And but at this party, they meet a lot of weird people. There's this again, it's sort of another little mythical stronghold which has danger but also has respite in this journey that they're on. And Chris meets a really charming, handsome a college student who is very taken with her as well.
And Daryl actually does have an interaction too. He tries to be one of the guys with these college kids and thinks that things are going his way, only to wind up having a heart conversation with another person, with one of the girls there. He thought he was going to pick up, and kind of just spending a portion of the rest of the movie in this little bit of a bewildered state where all of his bravado and his horn dog comments and all of that aren't the thing that was important when he actually got into the little mythical sanctuary of the things he expects. It was the fact that he could be a person someone could talk to. That's actually the important thing. And he kind of calms down a little and possibly spends the rest of the movie assessing some stuff.
Prior to this, his glibness and his utter lack of self-awareness were kind of his superpowers. And this was sort of evolved into another form by having a real conversation and having somebody who was older but not a grown-up wanting to have a conversation with him. You're right. He learned something from that.
So
not what he was expecting, but he learned.
Yeah, Brad's kind of mopey at this point because he's seeing Chris, who he's still got this massive crush on, kind of getting into this environment and actually being okay. She can brush off the more awful, the more Daryl at his worst of the people there.
Mm-hmm.
But she's actually kind of making connections with some of these people who are the people she might be attending colleges with in the future. And so Brad's not doing great, but Daryl learns a little something. And that's part of where he gets to grow in all of this. And Chris is possibly assessing how she can grow.
Yeah.
And this is where we start seeing the transformative properties of the journey really hit our characters.
Yes. And with Chris, it's less she changes. It's more that she learns more about herself and what her value is and what she should do with that. Brad has also learned things. And earlier on, he gets up the courage to tell Chris how he feels about her, and he's shot down.
Yeah, you're just a kid.
Yeah, you get the impression that that was very painful, but it was necessary, and he's learned something.
Mm-hmm.
He's gotten over that, and after that, he can relate to Chris more as a person than as an object of infatuation.
And that's important. But it's still, he's not taking everything great.
No, he's sad, but he's learned.
Mm-hmm. This also gives Sarah a chance to use the restroom. This is one of those few adventure movies where someone has to run to the restroom.
Yes.
But they get out of the party having been given $45.
Yeah, the guys there and this guy that Chris has met, I think they kind of take up a collection and they manage to pull together
it's like, hey, these people are in trouble. Who can pitch a few dollars, and they get 45 total.
So yeah, this is kind of like this college party is a little Rivendell or something.
It is.
This journey.
But and not only that, but this guy that Chris is kind of hitting it off with drives them in his car over to the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they finally see the car that they hadn't seen since it was on Pruitt's tow truck. And they meet Dawson.
Dawson, who has kind of the most awesome entrance for
Oh,
good reason,
absolutely.
because he's there in his shirt with a hammer in hand
These long
from
leather
working on the car,
boots. He's descending on a lift shrouded in steam.
and his blonde hair
Yes.
flowing.
Yeah,
And of
Vincent
course,
D'Onofrio with long blonde hair.
yes. And that's the most wild thing. But it's Sarah immediately. It's Thor.
And it's great because we see that. We get to recognize this. If you know who Thor is in 1987, we recognize
And you've seen
this.
all the pictures in her room at the
True.
start.
An instant before she does. It's like, Thor.
Thor. It's a perfect childlike wonder moment. But Dawson's having none of it.
Yes, he doesn't know what she's talking about. All he knows is they owe him $50. All they have is $45. Yeah, you owe me $50. No $50, no car.
He is very stiff, and he gets very angry at them, partially because Sarah, blabbing, tries to throw her brother under the bus to Thor about
Yes.
her brother not liking Thor.
Don't listen to him. He said you're a weirdo, or
yeah, which doesn't do well.
No.
But Sarah kind of offers to, like, looking up to
Yes.
him and offers him her hat, the winged helmet.
You went robot a little bit. Could you try that again?
But Sarah, keeping that wonder, looking up to Dawson thinking he's Thor, offers him her winged helmet to replace the one he obviously doesn't have.
That's why you're not being a hero. You don't have your magic helmet.
And this actually, like, melts Dawson's cold heart.
Wow.
In this beautiful little moment.
How could it not? You're giving this to me? Wow.
There's to reference back to a thing we did recently for the holidays. There's something very giving a yo-yo to Meister Burger about this. Oh, a winged helmet. I used to have a winged helmet like this when I was a boy. I would do all the tricks with it.
There's some continuum on which somewhere between Vincent D'Onofrio as Dawson/Thor and Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin.
Yes.
Right in the middle is Vincent D'Onofrio as Burgermeister Meisterburger for a live action Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Oh, that would work. That would work so well.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. But this melts his heart, and he says, okay, I'll take the 45, the car's yours, get out of here before I rethink it, and here, kid, I've got a helmet like this at home. Playing into it, and gives her back the helmet, which is perfect.
Yep.
But the fact that she looked up to him and was willing to give him something, really, like, you take it that this guy has dealt with anger and difficulty and kind of all the nasty parts of Chicago that they keep running into. So this actual open kindness is the surprise and the thing that he appreciates.
Yeah, you think of it in those fable terms. This is a little bit of magic that she has, that she was able to bring into this dangerous kingdom and use exactly at the right time.
Yeah, the optimism that's made it through is something that he does not get to have much.
Right.
And it's nice to have a bit of that for that moment. But they've got the car. They can go home after they theoretically pick up, Brenda or what's left of her.
Yeah, they do manage to save Brenda. She hasn't been killed yet.
But before they do, they go past the fancy restaurant that she and her boyfriend were supposed to go to today.
Yeah. And
but that's his car out front.
We've already learned that he drives a red sports car with "So Cool" on the license plate.
Yeah.
No mistaking that it's his car.
So why is he here if he canceled? Oh.
He decided to take a different girl on this date that he had promised Chris.
And Bradley Whitford gets to be the most awful guy in the movie.
Yes. We've got mobsters, we've got killers, we've got gangs, but nope, Bradley Whitford, the suburban high school football guy, is the worst guy in the world.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, in a remarkable amount of just absolute blind rage, Chris parks the car they just spent all of this time getting back to march in there and go give her ex-boyfriend Mike a piece of her mind. And this is actually not her moment, though, as much as it is Brad's, I'd say.
Yes.
Because Brad, who's been holding on to this crush the entire time, goes in with her. And when Chris is just so bewildered, so angry, so everything, Brad's able to say all the things he thinks is amazing about Chris and punches Mike out in Chris's defense. And he kind of lets go of his infatuation for Chris in this moment, I think.
Yeah,
in defending her as a friend, not as a romantic interest.
Right. This makes clear the fact that he now sees her as a person. She's not just this ethereal object of his infatuation. He has seen her in so many ways over the course of this night and seen what she has done for others. He has this genuine affection and respect for her. But he still chooses not to, he does not choose violence.
He doesn't. You're right.
He tells Brad off, tells her all the amazing things about Chris and Brad tells the boyfriend off and says all the amazing things about Chris and how you absolutely do not deserve her. I would like to punch your face in, but I won't because you're not worth it. Because I'm above that. It's Daryl who says, well, I'm not above that. And he kicks Mike into a table and causes the ruckus we were expecting when all of this goes down in the fancy French restaurant.
Yep. Adventures in Babysitting, the movie where you can see Anthony Rapp deck Bradley Whitford.
Yeah, I keep wanting to call him Brad because Bradley Whitford, but now he's Mike.
Yeah, he's Mike. Mike Toddwell.
So there's a name for you.
Absolutely.
But we do get the satisfaction of her having connected with someone more genuine who saw her more in the form of the guy she met at the college, and her learning the truth about Mike and realizing that she deserves better. So that's another part of her transformation, as well as getting to see Brad and Daryl take these active roles.
Exactly. Meanwhile, though, what has Sarah been doing? Sarah's been grabbing a chocolate eclair and running off towards the building where her parents are at a party.
Yeah, she's having a great time just eating an eclair she stole from the French restaurant and looking in the window of the Toy Story. No, the Toy Store.
Toy Store, you got it right. Yep.
And then running away when she sees the mobsters show up. And like you say, she runs towards the building where her parents work, which happens to be where the event that they went to attend this night is taking place.
Mm-hmm. So she runs in past the security and into the elevator, where she hits buttons, chocolatey fingers marking the buttons.
Yes.
And the two buttons are the floor where the party is, and a floor above that's unfinished. An under construction floor, which makes me wonder what this party's about, because it's not for the finishing of the building.
Maybe it's for whatever
maybe it's a fundraiser to finish it.
Maybe.
Oh yeah.
But
we
yeah,
never get
it's
that
a
answer.
wonderful set of the unfinished floor in a high rise with open windows that are not yet in place and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Because Sarah flees out onto the ledges of the windows of the slanted top of this Chicago skyscraper
Yeah.
to escape the goons, the main goon of the mob.
And this is, again, it gets more unbelievable here, but by this time enough strange things have happened. They've sort of led us there, and it's a little more believable by the time this starts. Especially, it's believable that Sarah would think that this is a reasonable way to escape.
Yeah, she's met her hero.
Right.
She didn't do this.
And meanwhile, Chris is having this dark moment because we've talked about how the fact through the entire movie, she has been so focused on, saving Brenda, but keeping these kids safe. And
now
having to deal with Mike distracted her from that part of her mission. And now there's a price to be paid for it.
Chris, Brad, and Daryl run up, and they actually take the floor that leads them to the party.
Yeah, so they wind up dodging their parents not wanting to be spotted while trying to figure out where Sarah has gone.
And luring the mob boss into the party. And then using the party as a way to escape back out after seeing Sarah on the window outside the party.
Yes.
Which is just one of those brilliant scenes where it's like, the parents like, oh, Chris must have taken the kids out for ice cream. They're going to be climbing the walls with from all the sugar by the end of this. And we, like, right behind them, there's their daughter climbing the side of the building in this perfect juxtaposition. I'm amazed that no one in the entire party notices.
Yes, they blocked that just right so that nobody happens to glance in her direction as she's there outside the window.
But it's her there, and the mob goon have climbed down to go grab her. But Chris, Brad, and Daryl run back to the elevator, get up a floor, and finally help retrieve Sarah with the help of a rope.
Right. And that's a wonderfully blocked scene there. Very tense as she's being hoisted up to safety, but she has to go right past the mobster who tried to climb out to get her. And he's sort of paralyzed with fear, but he knows this is his last chance to grab her. So he's trying that. That's a very tense scene, and it's done well.
It is. And Sarah kind of doesn't need to have a moment of reflection, but this is one of those moments where her brave attitude did get her over her head.
Yes.
Finally. And so you kind of, if everyone has a moment where they learn something and they grow, this is possibly Sarah's, like, there are things you can't handle yet moment.
And that she does need her brother.
Needs.
She needs her family. She needs her friends. She needs her babysitter.
Mm-hmm. She's not too old for this. She still can rely on them.
Right.
Because she's always been a little too gung-ho the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But they've gotten Sarah back, and the mob boss shows up, and Joe shows up and knocks out his boss.
Yeah.
And tells them they've been chasing you for this Playboy with their info the entire time. Put it on the boss's body and get out of here, kids. He'll wake up later and he'll have the info and you'll be gone.
Yeah,
so
he'll be mad, but he's not going to bother coming after you.
Exactly. Which is a nice assumption. And I don't remember if the boss noticed that Joe was the guy who knocked him out. Joe kind of takes a big risk here.
Yeah, that is a very serious risk. The boss might make some decisions just to help maintain discipline in his organization. But again, Joe is a criminal with a heart of gold, so he's willing to take that risk.
This might be a Joe runs and gets out of the business kind of story on the side there.
Yeah.
But now they've got their car. They're no longer being chased. And they can go get Brenda, who tries to say she's had a wild time that they wouldn't believe. And they make it home just before, like, in a car chase.
Yes, they
with the parents.
wind up passing them by on the interstate and ducking so they can't be seen.
Which gets little funny comments from the parents of like, these silly drivers. Can you believe our kids will be on the road soon? I'm scared. But they pull off the nothing's wrong.
Right.
And everything's fine.
The instant the kids jump into bed, she cleans up the kitchen. They make the house spotless seconds before the parents open the door.
I am a little bewildered that the response is, we got Brenda home. Like, we got Brenda and they said, like, go home, Brenda. But go home. Like, Brenda just ran away from home.
Yeah,
that was the point of this.
I kind of worry about Brenda.
Same.
They don't address what motivated Brenda to take such a drastic step.
Yeah. But that's the kind of the all's well ending. Although there is one last bit where, thanks to an extra lost piece that they left in his car, the college guy comes.
Yes,
and gets to ask Chris out on a date and return the lost property to the address.
Handsome, charming college boy comes back.
Exactly.
Which is a nice way to end it, because it shows that as Chris has learned something, as she has moved on has an opportunity to move on from Mike, there are people in the world who value her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's met one.
And it lets Brad stand there and kind of nod and be like, yep, that's where she's going. That's not me, and that's okay.
He's a little mopey, a little sad, but that's part of acknowledging the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's Adventures in Babysitting. A wild ride.
There's so much packed into this movie. It is so frenetic, and yet I can't say that any one scene seems poorly paced, seems too fast or too slow. But there's just so much piled on. And as I said, some of that is just because it's and then, and they find ways to tack things on. It still hangs together in kind of an organic way.
I've got to compare it to a movie I've seen it compared to a lot.
Oh, yeah?
Which is the movie from 1 year earlier. It's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's very much of a tone and a style there. It's got a similar moment-to-moment grand adventure kind of style.
And that and the Chicago setting, I think those are reasons why people tend to think of it as a sort of or a wannabe John Hughes movie. Mm-hmm. And yet I can understand that, but the essence of Ferris Bueller's Day Off is that Ferris is in control of every moment of every situation. Not even that he planned it ahead of time. But he's in control of himself and his circumstances. Everything about Adventures in Babysitting is that our protagonists are not in control, and it's about their responses to situations in which they are not in control.
Yeah, you want Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but we took out the brakes.
Yes.
That's Adventures in Babysitting.
Well, I think we might be headed for our final questions.
I think we are.
But before we get there, just a reminder, listeners, thank you very much for listening. And if you want to support the Inter-Millennium Media Project, you can go to www.immproject.com, and that's where you'll find a link to our store. If you like things like coffee mugs and notebooks and T-shirts and things like that. We've got logo merchandise. We've also got... for fans of The Prisoner, we've got things for the noble sport of Kosho.
Ah, yes.
And we've also got, for fans of our Space 1999 episode, we've got the perennial question, who cares about Phobos? And we've got more designs to come.
Exactly.
Also, another way to support the show is to join our Patreon, for which you'll find a link at IMMproject.com. And that's where you will find not only a way to support the show, but also a way to get more of the show, because you will get additional audio content if you join our Patreon. And you can also join at the Movie Club level, when you will get surprise DVDs in the mail.
You want to be able to experience the podcast the way I do, where Dad sends you Where my dad sends something that you've not seen before and you get to watch it for the first time, that's this.
But by far the best way to support the show is to give us reviews or ratings, and tell your friends, spread the word.
Please do.
Let people know about the podcast. And if you do want more of the podcast, in addition to what's on Patreon, if you go to immproject.com, that's where you will find all of our back episodes, over 100 of those. And Ian, where can people find you online?
I can be found at itemcrafting.com and as Item Crafting Live on Twitch and Item Crafting on YouTube.
And you can find me on bymatthewporter.com. That's where you'll find links to whatever I'm doing, including the By Matthew Porter YouTube channel, where you will find my movie reviews and movie theater reviews and things like my visit to the Roswell UFO Festival.
Aha. That's a fun series.
But now we have our final questions about Adventures in Babysitting.
Yeah.
Screen or no screen?
I think this is a screen. I've enjoyed watching it multiple times. I will say I shared it with my lovely Jen when we were watching it recently to recording this episode soon, and she, I think, had fun, but it didn't quite land for her.
No.
It can be a very subjective viewing depending on your actual like preference in terms of humor. It's got some very awkward and some very wild, tense, bewildering moments.
Yes.
So it's not for everyone, but I think it's an excellently done movie, and it's a screen in my book.
I would say that as well. I would say screen. It is not a movie that lends itself well, or it's not a good experience to analyze the movie too much while it's going. You sort of have to just let go and ride with it. And not everybody enjoys movies in that way. But if you can enjoy a movie in that way, I absolutely say screen. Take this ride. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
And most of the people in it are charming, except the ones who are supposed to be bad guys, and they're fun bad guys as well.
Exactly.
So the next question is revive, reboot, or rest in peace?
And this is where I get to reference some interesting stuff, because this movie keeps having life. Because there was an attempted TV show.
There was?
Yes. In 1989, there was an unsold television pilot for CBS. It was broadcast like one time and it never went anywhere. But there was a planned show, which I don't know how you do that with this movie.
I do not know how that would work. How you could sustain that. Maybe they weren't going to try to have anything like these stories. They were just going to have the characters. But I don't know how you sustain that for a sequel, let alone a TV series.
Yeah. But this is a movie that keeps getting replanned because it's owned by Disney, and they love having movies like this to be able to work with for future things. So there was plans for a TV movie remake starring Raven-Symoné, starring Miley Cyrus. It's one of these projects that they kept cycling Disney stars through. And eventually they did make, in 2016, a remake, kinda, of Adventures in Babysitting.
Huh. I have not seen that. I was vaguely aware that it existed, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, but I've read reviews and assessments of it, and it's completely different. The setup of babysitters going into the city and having an adventure is there, but it's two babysitters with two groups of kids in a post-cell phone age, which really changes stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a movie where $50 isn't the problem, but there's an entire $100 plot because the amount of money it costs to do a thing has risen so much in that amount of time. And this was the 100th Disney Channel original movie, which means Adventures in Babysitting 2016 has this weird spot of being this grand culmination of the Disney Channel original movies, which is this long running series of almost its own subgenre of cinema at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, the fact that this remake that has only tentative ties to its origin and this long history of being started up and not going anywhere, spinning its wheels in pre-production until they were using completely different people, has this grand spot, is this weird piece of legacy that almost feels disconnected from the thing it's a remake of.
That is odd. I mean, it doesn't to give that kind of position to a movie that struggled to be made and apparently didn't make a big impact. You would almost think they would want to make a surefire hit in an original property, an original movie, as that 100th movie spot, and say, well, let's save this one for 101 or 102.
Yeah, they did a marathon of like 53 Disney Channel original movies, culminating in the 100th one over Memorial Day weekend. Because they made a big deal of it, but it's a very different thing. Yeah. And it apparently was successful enough as that, but it's not the same kind of movie.
And I'm trying to think if it has any stylistic or plot connection to the original. Once you're in the world of cell phones, never mind the world of kids having, or people, certainly kids who are old enough to be high school seniors, having emergency credit cards or something, but even just the cell phones. The only way to drive a plot like that is to either take away the cell phone, which you can contrive to do, or just use the kind of sitcom trope of choosing not to communicate, even when it's a life and death situation. And that changes things too much.
Yeah.
Because then it's suddenly a choice. It's not a circumstance you're reacting to.
From what I know, they do the get rid of their phones by having kind of two different, instead of one babysitting crew, they've got two, and they wind up having the main characters accidentally swap phones.
Huh.
So part of it is that I don't have mine, so I don't have access.
Well, that at least is interesting. At least they do something interesting there.
It's a very different kind of thing, but they're doing something with it. And there's this intertwining. Imagine if Deborah had her own babysitting group.
Yeah.
And her interludes were an entire parallel adventure story.
Huh.
And then interweave the two as they go through. That's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to see that, but yeah, maybe they did find an interesting way forward with the story.
Mm-hmm. So that leaves us with revive, reboot, or rest in peace.
Yeah.
I will say one thing of reboot or revive or something here. Mm-hmm. There is a very funny thing. Adventures in Babysitting is a movie that heavily features the concept of Thor and is a movie that has a post-credits scene.
Yes,
this thing is early Marvel. Because after all the credits are done, we see the mob goons still stuck on the side of the tower, really worried that no one's going to get him.
So are you saying the world of Adventures in Babysitting has a Marvel multiverse number? We just don't know what it is?
I think it might be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just happens to be one where no one actually interacts, and we already know Asgardians interacted with the Marvel Cinematic World earlier before the Thor movie came out, so this could explain stuff.
It's
for all we know.
614.5 maybe or something.
Exactly.
I like that. It's a proto Marvel movie. Well, if they ever do another remake or anything like that, they've got to
cast Hemsworth.
They've got to have Chris Hemsworth as Dawson. That alone would be worth a remake.
Doing a remake, and you can even do like they did the 2016 remake and use a different plot, honestly. But if you include Dawson and cast Hemsworth, all of the fans of the original will go, "It's that! They did the thing!"
That would be perfect.
Which would be kind of perfect.
Yep. Well, I'm not going to expect that, but it would be cool.
Yeah, so I don't know if I need a reboot.
Yeah, barring that, I would say rest in peace. It now plays as a period piece, but it holds up well as a good period piece. It's a period piece of the 80s.
I agree. I have, interestingly though, from my most recent viewing, I thought up a revival I'd be interested in seeing.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. Which is, I'd be fascinated to see the story of Joe, the
Huh.
former car thief, on the run now, fleeing the mob he betrayed.
Oh,
And
that's...
who do we pair him with? Brenda, the girl trying to run away from home, finally having a driver to get her out of there. It's kind of doing a bandit.
Oh,
It's kind of doing
Bandit?
Smokey and the Bandit
Interesting.
with car thieves as this buddy road escape where they're both running away, but in one way or another, like Brenda really should go back and Joe knows that, but Joe can't go back for his own risk, but he's too nice of a guy to not try to spend the time figuring out a way to convince Brenda to not run away. And there's this, like, I kind of wanted to put those two together because I feel like there's a spin-off story of an adventure those two could have done,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
I would be down for that.
I'd be down for that too. It'd be interesting. But it's also not Adventures in Babysitting. It's a completely separate story with a tangential connection. But it was an interesting enough idea. I wanted to pitch it.
Adventures
but most
in car
of it's
boosting? I don't know.
Kind of, yeah. But in the end, I think it is a rest in peace.
I think so.
But it's a loving one again.
The fact that it gives us these ideas to think about is part of
exactly.
Yeah.
There's rests in peace that we give that are like, no one, please don't.
Let's just put that over there and leave it alone forever.
Exactly.
That's not this one.
That's not this. This is a fun one, but it does its thing well.
Yep. So this was fun. I was glad I got a chance to see this again and got a chance to show it to you again.
Fun film.
Always fun to go back to the 80s. We're going to go back a little bit farther next time, but we will indeed be back with more tales of media from the 20th century.
Huzzah! And in the meantime, go find something new to watch.
Oh, I've got this index card on which I was writing a little grid of the terms that were used in the original edit and the terms they replaced them with. It looks like I'm preparing to like train the world's rudest large language model AI.
I mean, this just connects back to the episode before this. This is the missed puzzle that no one bothers to solve.
Right.